All right, we're back with the Dr. Z show. And this is going to be part two of our bullying and general vile parts of the nerd culture that we all know and love. Not that we know and love the vile parts, but that they're there and are acknowledged that they exist. And what you can do to stop them. Only you can prevent forest fires, but also usually only you can start forest fires. So both sides of
um,
the coin.
yeah, we've, Jacob is here as well.
I
And we
mean, you
have
have
our
to be.
guest. Yeah.
Hello, hello.
And we have, yes, Irina is back
I'm glad
as
to
a
be here.
guest. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I enjoyed the creating it last time with you guys, and I'm glad to be back again.
So kind
We
of
are
as
glad
a
you are back because your perspective is a much needed one.
something just kind of to spark conversation. Last time, we talked about bullying, kind of definition of that, and examples of it. Um, this time we'll be talking more about gatekeeping. And I've been reading an article, a Wikipedia article about like sexism in video games. There's a lot of like interesting studies about the effects of kind of media portrayal on people's expectations of both themselves and other people. And it's really powerful. Like and I guess I understand a little bit more. Not necessarily. It's like not acceptable that people are jerks. But it seems like there's a much higher correlation between um like terrible portrayals of how like life is or how like women should be treated or other things like that in media and people's actual reactions to that. And so it's just there's like lots and lots of studies about like the effects of kind of media on people's uh like how people react to things. So that's just kind of like in going into this. Some of these issues are like endemic to the media that we consume, and not just it's not just terrible people being terrible, but like some of this is being and like even the good people who maybe let it slide when they shouldn't. It's partly because of like just how the media is portrayed.
Okay, I'm gonna raise my hand because I'm super uneducated. Can you define endemic for those of us who are unsure of the definition?
So endemic is when an issue is an inherent characteristic of something and is very pervasive. So like sexism in video games is not just like the sexism represented perhaps by consumers of video games is not just because of those people's personal opinions coming out. It's because sexism is portrayed like in the actual narratives of like the comic books or the
Okay,
video games themselves, and thus like kind of like self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit.
and it becomes part of the problem, especially because of and when these like games and things are targeted towards younger audiences. I would say
Yep.
especially so, like, you know, okay, like for example, just like wild kind of out there example, Fortnite is a very popular video game that is very popular with like the young crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
If if there were some kind of ingrained or like very purposeful element of sexism or racism or ism in general, if
Yeah.
if it were there, then you could make the argument, you would be wrong, I would say. But you could make the argument that then that it's okay. And it's obviously not, and we know as, like free thinking, I hesitate to use the word adults, but it's the descriptive word. Adults that it is not wrong, but when you're, talking about the mind of a child or someone whose brain is not fully developed, like you're seeing this and saying, like, oh, this is the way things are in this instance, maybe that means that it's okay all the time.
Right. Well, and I think that even with in terms of the way that societies develop, we pick up on unconscious cues. No matter how developed we are, we pick up on unconscious cues, and we pick up on whether or
Subliminal
not things are
messaging,
social,
kind of.
and we pick up on whether or not things are socially acceptable. If it's the same way that, for example, if someone makes a joke that is inappropriate in some way, we notice how people will react to that. And if, however, whatever way that joke might be inappropriate, and if we notice that everyone frowns and goes, oh, that's not okay, we notice that and we recognize that if we make jokes like that, we might lose social capital, there might be consequences, etc. Whereas if everyone laughs and the person receives adulation, we then recognize, that's something that this particular group enjoys and likes, and I can gain social capital from that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that I think is also, I think that's also very vital, simply because so often when somebody says, XYZ thing, this kind of publication or whatever needs to change, no one's saying that these people should be going to jail for publishing something. It's all about,
Not in
it's
this
a matter.
country anyway.
Yeah, right. That, yeah. In the United States, what people are saying is we need to make XYZ thing socially unacceptable. And that's a matter of the free market, frankly.
Free market economy and free market economics. Today's economics lesson brought to you by a bunch of nerds.
Yep.
Also, on the notes of talking about like gatekeeping, I guess we'll talk about what gatekeeping is, but also some specific cultural events that are examples of gatekeeping, and also kind of like advocations of violence in like media. And this is like Gamergate, Comicsgate, and a little, perhaps a little bit less so with the violence, but like the Sad Puppies Hugo Awards event
That Jacob and I both just found out was a thing.
So yeah,
I'm
looking
not
at
ashamed to admit that.
like the various kinds of gates and gatekeeping. Yeah.
So, crew, what is gatekeeping?
All right. Should we start with Wikipedia?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Wikipedia has been a great source.
So gatekeeping is, according to Wikipedia, a term that began in the 40s in social psychology. It was popularized by a guy named Kurt Lewin in 1943. And it's, in general, a process through which information is filtered for dissemination, for publication, broadcasting, or any kind of communication. And it focuses on the ways in which someone decides what sources are chosen for inclusion, and also and what information is chosen for inclusion, but also who has access to what.
Okay.
And so gatekeeping is the process of making the decision of whose information and viewpoint is going to be included and who has access to what information and what communities. Is the most general definition of gatekeeping.
Okay.
I'm sure that became, not to say like in the 40s it wasn't like an issue, but I'm sure that became a more trying to find the right word. Knowledgeable is not the right word. Well known. That's where I'm
Yeah.
going with this. A
Yeah.
more well known term and a more widely used term, probably during the Red Scare.
Yep.
People trying to
Probably.
filter
Yeah.
information in such a way that made them seem less socialist or more socialist, or made other people seem less socialist or more socialist.
Well, and also during the civil rights movement, as the idea of gatekeeping became, and the idea of which communities and which people based on identity were given access to very basic services.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, even before that, you could go as far to say that slavery is a form of
Right.
gatekeeping.
It absolutely is it's a form of gatekeeping. I'm just saying it wasn't labeled until the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Right. It
I mean,
wasn't labeled with this is
gatekeeping has been
gatekeeping.
around. Yeah, gatekeeping. The part of the theory of gatekeeping is that it's been around as long as humanity, but we're only in the 20th century, in the midway through the 20th century, do we start actually labeling it for what it was. And so that's the other thing, is that this is not the idea of gatekeeping is not a new practice. It's not something where suddenly, and this is an important point simply because there's a fallacy here. One of the ways in which people have tried to debunk the idea of gatekeeping is by saying you wouldn't expect to see something like this as society has progressed. Then why is there suddenly so much more gatekeeping? It's not that there's more gatekeeping.
We're just
Right.
noticing it now.
Exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
It's
calling it what
the
it
same
is.
way. Exactly. That's exactly right. We're only now calling it what it is. Because in 1940, the word did not exist.
And I can say this because I'm sure they don't and will never listen to this. I've had this conversation with my parents where they've been like, sort of very vaguely, the news is on or they're watching the news sort of in the background, and they're like, why does everything have to be gay now? Like, it's always been gay.
Yep.
We're just now noticing it or now acknowledging it because like now it's okay, or now, it's more okay to talk about.
Well, and it's also where you get things like the fallacy that ADHD and autism only exist today. It's just that the diagnostics for it only exists today.
You're taking care of the kids instead of putting them in an asylum.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Not that doesn't still happen, but yeah, exactly. Only now are services available. Only now are we actually working to make accommodations and things like that. Rather than just saying, "Oh well," special education is a thing. Yeah, yeah.
And the technology, like, to notice this is a problem for this reason, not because like kids are crazy or whatever.
Right. Well, and only now do we really even have the will for it. And I mean, there's I could go on about that that's a whole nother topic, but the history of ADHD and autism in the human race. But it's not a new thing. So much of what's going on now, where people say, why suddenly is such and such a thing on the rise in the younger generations? It's often not that it's on the rise. It's just that only now are we understanding what it is, and the diagnostics for it are on the rise.
And I would, not to get us sort of like the social points here, but I would say that our generation is more accepting.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree.
Abled or queer or just things that are, quote, different than normal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, normal divergent. Yeah. And yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And it was honestly one of my favorite things about teaching high school for so long, was the fact that
you got to watch it happen.
Yeah, and looking at the generations after my own, and seeing so many of the things that annoy me about my own generation and generations before mine, and seeing that things are getting better.
Well, we're trying.
I don't know if this is something we should talk about or if it would be too big. But so I'm reading about Gamergate still, like, because the Wikipedia article is massive.
Because
but
it's a
one
massive thing. But
one of the things it says is that, so the first headlines you read are always like the horrible things that have been said by the people who are in support of keeping women and other kind of social issues out of media, whatever, and just rape threats, death threats to women in the industry. That's kind of what is going on and stuff like this. But there's also this later on as you read, as the supporters of these causes become more public or whatever, they are also receiving death threats and bomb threats and other things. And so
even being a part of the white cisgender male community that you would think is not the minority will get the hate mail and the death threats solely for supporting, or even to the point of just suggesting, hey, maybe there's some validity to the argument that women aren't equally represented, or that the queer community is not equally represented.
Oh, no. This is
I think he's referring to the fact that there were members of the Gamergate campaigns that received hate mail and death threats from people who were not.
Yeah, so it's basically
that was that was absolutely a thing that happened. That was absolutely a thing that happened, and it was something that, it was the kind of thing that one of the reasons why I wish so many times that during when it was reaching its height, that there were better ways and mechanisms for law enforcement to get involved.
Yeah.
And only now are laws surrounding cyberbullying, harassment, threats. Only now is the law even beginning to catch up to the level of harassment and threat that was happening during Gamergate, because in both cases, one of the things that both sides were doing was suggesting that people were fabricating threats against themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't think either side was doing that, honestly. I really don't. But it's the kind of thing that law enforcement really should have been getting involved with, and there was just no way for them to do it at the time.
This is something that I don't really want to push into this kind of territory, but we did have a huge discussion about this when I was studying for my ethical hacking certification. And it being sort of the kind of acceptance, and to many people's horrifying realization that laws will never ever catch up to how fast technology will and has evolved.
Yeah,
and that's just the fact.
That's a very good.
While it may not be the way it should be, that's a fact of democracy. You cannot pass and understand laws fast enough to catch up to how fast technology evolves.
The question that I had then is kind of what, how do you combat, what's the appropriate way to combat bullying? And I think
socially.
Yeah, because it's obviously
Did you say socially?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's sending bomb threats to the bullies. Unless you're in an actual war.
Yeah, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
Violence
it is absolutely unacceptable. Yeah, it is absolutely unacceptable. And it's one thing, among other things. I mean, let's be clear. Self-defense is one thing, but sending a bomb threat is in no way self-defense.
Yeah.
there is no way in which that works as self-defense, logistically.
And like I've argued the other side of this kind of to a degree, but if you kill a killer, the number of killers in the world remains the same. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
And then to put the lighthearted joke in there, if you kill 100 killers, then the number goes down by like 99. But
right.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, and yeah, and I mean that, and I think this is why socially is such an important concept. The idea of simply making bullying unacceptable and making these things unacceptable, and this is one of the things where the difference in the sort of both sidesism comes out, is that the fact that both sides were publicly saying, no, this is absolutely unacceptable. This behavior is unacceptable. We condemn it. We distance ourselves from it. We refuse to accept that this is who we are. And yet,
and while there is a lot of that, and that's it's important to sort of save yourself first. It's kind of the idea of like put your mask on before you put the child's mask on.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do something about it. And
right,
if you
then
don't
have to
say something or do something, then you are complicit. Like
that's exactly right.
If you don't say, hey, cut that out, like it's not cool or it's not right or it's just wrong, in any way, then you are complicit. You are agreeing and saying, basically, this is okay, this is fine.
And that's the difference that I see in the behavior that I experienced anyway, in the behavior, and tell me if you saw something different at the time that Gamergate was happening, which was that when Gamergate and people within Gamergate would say, oh, the fact that Brianna Wu, for example, has received death threats such that she's had to leave her home and go into FBI protection is 100% unacceptable, and we absolutely condemn any threats and harassment that have been made against her or against anyone else. Meanwhile, someone in Gamergate would get threats, and people who were sort of campaigning and speaking out against Gamergate would say, no, this is absolutely not okay. The difference is that then the next step is that the people speaking out against Gamergate, if we found out who somebody was that had been making those threats, we would do things like give their names to Twitter and say, please suspend this person's account.
Yeah.
Whereas
if you take away free speech, even from a moron, you are only like, you have to let idiots speak.
You do not
that
have
the
to let
whole
people
world knows that they're an idiot.
But threatening is not the same as being an idiot. Let's be clear about that. There is a difference between letting someone put whatever they're going to out there, no matter how uninformed or ignorant or whatever else it is, that opinion or viewpoint or whatever might be. There's a big difference between that and saying, well, it's freedom of speech to let someone post rape threats.
Right.
That is not.
As an example, like if you're raising kids and one kid is like telling the other kid like you're stupid and horrible and like you should die, like you're not going to be like, oh, well, freedom of speech, like I should just let him keep talking. Like,
and Twitter has its terms of service, and those terms of service are not a violation of constitutional freedom of speech.
Yeah. Although
your freedom of speech, it is absolutely important. It is absolutely important. But terms of service on a social media site are not a violation of the First Amendment. Let's be clear about that.
Yeah, Twitter is a business, and I say this all the time to my fiance. Like, businesses are in business to make money. Mm-hmm. They and social media to sort of a lesser extent because they kind of have to. Businesses do not care about your feelings. They do not care about your life. They want your money. Businesses want your money. That's how they operate.
That's exactly what's happening right now also with social platforms like Tumblr. Tumblr has recently been in serious trouble for trafficking issues and also for stolen content. And so as a result, they are now placing new restrictions on the content that can be posted to Tumblr. And of the many, many arguments that are being made against what they're doing, including the fact that their algorithms are terrible, and so, for example, their own post explaining the new rules got flagged.
As an explicit post.
Yes.
That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing.
So, I mean, that's a great example.
Hilarious and sad.
Yeah, it's a terrible algorithm. The criticisms of things like, wow, that algorithm is awful. And things like anybody whose name is Richard and uses the nickname Dick got flagged. Things like that. The algorithm is awful, and that is a 100% valid criticism of what's going on. The idea that Tumblr is violating people's freedom of speech by making these restrictions is not a valid criticism. Because what they have done is that they have stepped back and said, it is bad for our business to have this image of ourselves, that we allow human trafficking, that we allow stolen content. So we are making changes to the way that we run our platform so that we will make more money in the future. That's why they're doing this.
We are attempting to make change.
Right. Yeah, and they're not doing it. They're doing it. Yeah, they're doing it very, very badly. But that's the nature of what's going on. And so when people are saying, oh, well, when someone is removed from a social platform for bullying and threats, and people say, oh, it's freedom of speech is being, someone's freedom of speech is being violated. No, it's not. XKCD has a great cartoon about this where they're saying, no, they have simply decided that you have violated their rules, and they are showing you the door.
We reference XKCD a lot on the show, and I don't think anyone's ever said anything as to like what it is. XKCD, if you go to just www.xkcd.com, it is a webcomic written by, correct me if I'm wrong, a mathematician?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's a mathematician. Yeah, and I think he
has engineering background, math background, programming background. Someone who's just basically very intelligent, but it's a lot of there's a lot of social commentary and kind of just what's going on in the industry. And if you are a part of any of those kind of industries or just have any kind of general interest in that kind of academia nerd culture, I definitely suggest that you should check it out. I would definitely not hesitate to say it. Check it out.
It's very good.
It's wonderful.
Not for everybody, but if you like it, hey, that's a new thing.
They've also produced a book as well that was based on one of their comics that's fantastic. It's based on the comic called The Upgoer 5, in which they did an explanation of the Apollo missions to the moon using only the 1000, or as they put it, the 1000 most commonly used words in the English language, of which the word thousand isn't one of them, so they had to call it 1000.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And they then wrote a sort of book in the model of the old classic, The Way Things Work, that also is only using those words. And I think it's called The Thing Explainer.
Yeah, I've been trying.
It's wonderful.
For a while.
It's fantastic. So yeah, their book is fantastic. There was also a wonderful cartoon contest that you can still see the results of online between the author of XKCD, the author and artist of XKCD, and the main cartoonist behind the New Yorker, in which they were given sets of themes and were tasked to do cartoons on the same themes using the same style. And then people voted on which one was best, and it was an intense contest.
Anyway, not to get off on our XKCD tangent, I just keep noticing that we're referencing XKCD, and we've never really explained what it is. It's a webcomic. It's great.
Yep.
Check it out.
Not
sponsored.
But yeah, and so in this particular case, they're spot on that when someone is banned from Twitter. So, for example, during Gamergate, celebrity Milo Yiannopoulos was banned from Twitter.
Shocking.
For his
for being a massive
racist. Well, and for specifically for his harassment of actress Leslie Jones. Very specifically for his harassment of her. and for his essentially deliberate orchestration of mob violence, and the degree to which he very, very deliberately organized thousands of people to invade her life.
Yeah.
And for that, he was not just suspended, but banned from Twitter. And when that happened, that was widely, first of all, widely celebrated among certain groups, and then among other groups, widely decried as a violation of his freedom of speech, which it flatly was not, because he had been violating the terms. Twitter is a business, and they realized that it was bad for their business to have Milo Yiannopoulos on their service, so they banned him. Period.
Do not collect $200.
And people kept trying to interpret it. People on all sides kept trying to interpret it as some kind of political statement. It was not. It was just a statement of, well, we realize that people are not likely to join Twitter while he's here.
Here's the terms of service. Here's how you violated it.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bye.
I mean, honestly, if they were to make an argument, I think like the only valid argument they could perhaps make would be like stretching for like freedom of the press. But granted, Twitter is the press in that case, and it's like their decision to publish or not publish things.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it would be very different if, for example, Congress, if the situation had been that Congress contacted Twitter and said, you have to ban him, that's a different issue.
Yeah, or if some like federal agency from some country, let's continue to use the United States as an example. If like the FBI contacted whoever's in charge of Twitter right now, and I don't even know who it is, just to show off how uneducated about these things I am, and said, hey, you have to get rid of this person because they're mean on the internet. Like, Twitter is well within their rights to tell the FBI to go fuck themselves. Like,
yep.
but that's where it is. Like,
Well, as contrasted with, for example, one of the things that happened during Gamergate and is happening again during Comicsgate, that there are parts of the internet where they pride themselves on people being able to say anything and everything. Where on, for example, Reddit or 4chan, where someone will do or say something and the FBI will get involved and will go to Reddit or 4chan and say, all right, we need this person's ISP information. And there are times when Reddit and 4chan say no. And there are times when Reddit and 4chan are presented with a warrant for, say, child pornography. And that is absolutely not protected speech. And so at that point, Reddit and 4chan say, yes, here's that ISP.
Yep.
So I'm going to, again, rewind because we are very heated about this topic and we are maybe getting ahead of ourselves sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
What is... We'll start here because we referenced it several times now. What is Gamergate in our own words? And let's start with Jacob. What was your what was your introduction to it, and how did you learn about it? Because I would say what's your reaction, but I can guarantee that the three of us have the same opinion, and it is our opinion that it sucks. And it's bad, wrong, and it should not have happened in the first place. But here we
are. Basically, Gamergate was a movement. I found out about it from you2, but then I went and read a Wikipedia article about it, kind of detailing everything. Basically, there was a falling out between a female video game developer and her boyfriend, and he posted some nasty stuff on the internet, and then some supporters of his on the internet decided that it would be a good idea to send her rape threats and lots of other nasty things, but then that kind of exploded into lots of people with kind of a similar opinion, that they felt like video games have too much representation of what is referred to often as like social justice warrior elements. There's like a bunch of people who feel that that is like not okay, and that video games are like that's not the right platform, or just that that opinion shouldn't exist in the first place. And so
I'm very
they
interested
have
to know
started.
where these people are finding these things and where they're getting their information from. Because like, too much information, too much of this, like.
Yeah. So like one example,
What?
there was a game like interestingly enough, Baldur's Gate, like a sequel to it, I guess,
Oh
um,
yeah,
that had like
great
a
gameplay.
character. Yeah, it had like a character who mentioned vaguely that they could have been trans, and like the people that was just one character out of like all of
Mhm.
the characters that were in the entire game, and
Which is a lot.
everyone was like, and these people like freaked out about it. They were like, "That's like not okay." And I guess the only thing that I would say in terms of like people's like reactions and stuff like this is, um, I think some people just have like really strong opinions about stuff, and like if someone feels alienated by that, like so have all of the like gay and trans people who have been in the world for their entire lives. So like like maybe don't like freak out. Like if you
Yeah, and
feel
that's like,
alienated by like a single character being included, like
yeah, that's the thing. Is like these people have been alienated and are continuing to be alienated simply because
yeah,
they exist. Like you
yeah,
as a white
like they're
person,
not trying to kill
like
you.
you
Like
need to
they're not
chill.
posting your address on the internet. Like, geez Louise. So,
Well, and
anyways,
okay.
that's that's kind of, and it's exploded into like Felicia Day, for instance. She mentioned that she was wary of even talking about it because of fear of retaliation, and she got like death threats and craziness. Like
Who was that? Sorry.
Felicia
Felicia
Day,
Day.
Right,
like
right, right.
she
Okay.
didn't even speak out against it. She just mentioned that she was scared to speak out against it, and like
She
they
was
true
doxxed
to
within 24
form,
hours.
yeah, true to form, like these people who I don't know, like I don't understand honestly. Um, like man's inhumanity to man. But like they decided to like retaliate against her, and then like a bunch of dudes spoke out against it, and nothing. They had no retaliation at all. Like so, it seems to be a tendency of, I guess the whole like gate thing is a tendency of people to, particularly dudes, to hate on women, and quote unquote progressive social issues, or people who even have opinions supporting those things, in video games, both in the industry and just like those ideas.
Yep.
Okay. So, Irina, what was your sort of introduction, reaction, kind of whole deal?
So, so I've been a gamer for a very long time. And I was already, well out of graduate school, well into my career, married, um, when the whole thing started. But a number of friends of mine were targeted by it. I made a comment on a very small time blog that I was irritated by it and felt that it was giving the entirety of gamer fandom a bad image. And among other things, express sympathy to the portion of people who identified with Gamergate who actually did care about the infamous ethics in video game journalism issue. And basically said, look, if this is really an issue that you cared about, you need to leave Gamergate behind and form a different group that's about this, because Gamergate has been irreparably tainted as a concept by the things that are going on, by the harassment of Leslie Jones, by the fact that Brianna Wu and Zoe Quinn and Anita Sarkeesian have had to seek FBI shelter from these threats. And I started speaking out a little more vociferously on places like my Facebook, when A couple of universities got bomb threats for offering some of these women a place to speak.
Oh yeah, that was the other thing.
Because I'm as an educator, that hit home for me. And I thought, because at the time I kept my Facebook very, very locked down, and my blog was very small time and did not have my name on it. And so I figured I didn't have a Twitter. So I figured I was probably pretty safe. Nope. We started getting harassment by phone. We started getting phone calls from like sexual assault porn services. Like we had to call law enforcement for help. We wound up having to change our phone number. It was really scary. And that was when I started getting much more involved in it. Now, I'm going to be clear, I do identify very proudly as a social justice warrior, but much more now than I did then. Frankly, the whole Gamergate thing pushed me much more toward that because of the degree to which it showed me the worst of what fandom is capable of. It was stunning to me at the time that it happened. When Zoe Quinn, who is the developer of the game Depression Quest, which was what started this whole thing off, was when Depression Quest got a very negative response online because it wasn't the kind of game that people felt should be made, because it wasn't about action, it wasn't about developing skills, it was about using fiction and storytelling to grapple with mental illness. And in a very personal, emotional way. And people felt very threatened by that, because if that game did well and things like that did well, it threatened the very fabric of what these people for whom this was their primary form of entertainment, it threatened the very fabric of their fandom and their culture, their gamer subculture, if it changed in that way. So when you say, well, these people aren't trying to kill you, they're not posting your address online. No, nobody was posting their address online, but people were saying this thing that is beloved to you, this thing that you identify with. We talked last time about how being a nerd and being a fan is something that you take as part of your identity. So these people were people who identified strongly that this was part of not just something that they did, but who they were. And they were being told who you are is going to change, whether you want it or not. So they did feel legitimately that was under threat, because games themselves were going to change whether they wanted it or not. And so I do want to put that out there, that was very real. But the reaction to it was to say, in order to stay who we are going to keep anyone who doesn't want games to be exactly what they've always been, and we're going to gatekeep those people out of gaming. And originally, the term Gamergate, the obvious reference is to Watergate, which is why there have been a whole bunch of other, XYZ Gate things ranging from Deflategate on up. But it's also a reference to gatekeeping. And the people who came up with the term Gamergate itself was actually coined by actor Adam Baldwin. And it was then promoted by people who are professional storytellers. And so they were very much aware that, on the one hand, yes, it references Watergate and it's catchy, but it's also a reference to the idea of gatekeeping and putting a gate on the idea of being gamers and saying, this is who can be a gamer.
Out or away.
Yes. And saying, this is who can be a gamer and this is who can't. And because so often in games, it's a very specific form of storytelling, of narrative, in which you take on a role and basically saying, no, this is the kinds of role we are going to take on in games. You will never make us take on a role that is not straight, white, cisgendered, able-bodied, male.
And so, like, I'm gonna go on and sort of say my piece on this. Not to interrupt you or throw you off track.
That was my piece. So. And
I'm gonna go on and sort of say my piece on this, and that's honestly where we're gonna have to end today, because we're already getting up there in terms of
You're at
time.
45 minutes. Yep.
But like, and,
Yeah.
I'm honestly, I'm trying not to get too fired up about this. But like, if you believe that, if you are one of those people that is like, we are gonna keep games straight, white, cisgender, able-bodied male, you're a fucking idiot. Like,
Keep that one.
things change. Change is inevitable. Like, change will happen.
Preach it.
Whether you want it to or not, for good or for ill, things become different. And you can do all you can and all you want to stop change, but change will happen. And you can do one of two things. You can accept the positive change and embrace the positive change. You can accept the negative change and embrace the negative change. But you have the power to change things.
Well, and
And
I'd just like to end on one quick thing. One of the issues at hand is the question of who you identify with in a game. And one of the issues that came up was people saying, I'm not sure that games can be fun for me anymore because I will have to identify with someone who isn't like me. Women and people of color and disabled people have been doing that for decades. I
their
believe,
whole life.
yeah. I believe that straight, white, cis, able-bodied men, I believe you can do it. I know that you have that imagination. If you can make these games, you can identify with these people. I think you're better than that.
And here is the very, I wouldn't say it's probably not the oldest and it's probably not the most famous, but to me, me as a person, it is the first one that comes to mind. Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, Lara Croft is a woman. If you are a straight white man and you say, games are this and they should only be this, and they shouldn't have women and they shouldn't have queer or disabled people or they shouldn't have this or they shouldn't have that. Stop playing Tomb Raider because you're a hypocrite and you suck.
Also,
Like,
Metroid.
yeah, even that. Like, one of Jacob's favorite game series of all time. Like,
Yep.
if he was a shithead, then he shouldn't play Metroid.
Also, you
Not
can
gonna
drop
lie.
Zelda.
Yeah,
It's got women and it's named after a woman.
yeah. So
The other thing is, like,
I
if that's
was
really how they
there.
feel, like, there are other options that don't include violence. Like, you could just choose not to frequent a store. Like, you don't have to, like, threaten it.
Or just play different
Like,
games. I mean, one of the things that these people have often said is, if you don't like these games, don't play them. Okay, that's fine, but that still means we need to have other options in existence. So that's part of what we're advocating for. Is, we want to make sure that we have other options other than don't play games at all.
Yeah, no one is saying, no one anywhere in their right mind is saying, like, oh, like, all games have to include, a gay, queer, disabled character. No one is saying that.
I mean, it'd be nice if more of them did, simply because then more of us could play more games and then we'd all have more to talk about.
Yeah, that's what we're
yeah.
saying. And that's the root of the issue, is like people that are saying like, oh, like, why is everything gay? Like, no, it's not. It's becoming more acceptable to be that, and it should. It should become acceptable for you to be, like, whatever you want. Like, and it's shocking to me that it's not okay to people if you are different than everyone else.
As a queer, neurodivergent, disabled woman, it does make me laugh that it's shocking. But yeah, it shouldn't be. It should always be acceptable.
Yeah, and I was there, sort of, in the beginning, kind of, to not to be dramatic about it, but like, I watched Gamergate unfold, much to my happiness and to my horror. To my happiness, in the sense that, like, yes, finally, we're talking about this. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
need to talk about this.
Oh, it could have
It's
been so good.
obvious. But much to my horror, in that, like, why is everyone so defensive? Like, you know, jump in front of a bus for Call of Duty. Like, chill. Like, all right? Like, no one is trying to take away your anything. No one is trying to take away anything from you as the group, as the majority group. All we were trying to do is provide options, choice for the minority. Because honestly, as the majority, you have so much choice. You have more choice than you know what to do with.
There's a
Freaking
wonderful
100 games are uploaded to Steam every day. Pick one.
there's a
Like,
wonderful meme out there that shows a picture of Dudley Dursley from the beginning of the first Harry Potter movie, and it says, "But last year I had 37 cis white male protagonists."
yeah.
Oh man.
It's funny, but it's scary.
Uh huh.
Because there are people out there that honestly believe that they are, like, under attack.
Yep.
I don't know. We gotta stop. I need to take
So
a bath.
yes,
Like, an
yeah,
emotional
yeah.
bath.
Everyone, go take your showers and get all the emotional gook off before we can talk about GamerGate and the fact that none of this is over.
Yeah, it's
Or
Comics
Comicsgate.
Gate, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Comicsgate. Yeah, that's what I meant.
we'll
Uh,
we'll get on we'll get on the gates,
yeah, I
and
feel like GamerGate is such a big topic. It deserves its own episode.
yeah, and we could talk forever and ever and ever about this, but I'll send us out, and I'll reiterate my point that I made in the last episode. All this is an introduction, and it is our
Yeah.
opinion. If you feel strongly about these things, if these issues matter to you, go out, research them, do your own research, learn as much as you can about something, and not to be, like, cliche, but, like, fight for what you believe in.
But
I
don't like
have
fight
I have a whole
other
yeah.
people.
Not
I have
yeah,
a whole
no,
set
not
of
fight someone, not, like, go out and, like, attack people, but you know what I
yeah,
mean.
I have a whole set of links on Gamergate that I'm perfectly happy to share with the post. So if somebody wants to go do some research on it, I have some places to start. Um,
Definitely.
so I can include those in the post or post them in the comments, whichever you all prefer. We can figure that out afterward. Um, and because yeah, it's a heck of a rabbit hole, and it's hard sometimes to know where to start, even to look at this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so let us know what you guys think in the comments. Like, what
I'm
side?
I'm gonna be honest. I'm a little scared.
I'm not really. I mean,
We don't have
I,
enough viewers.
we don't have, yeah, no, we don't have
that
the
may change.
audience, the views, and, like, I've kind of,
I mean, as the woman on the show right now, I'm a little scared.
well, yeah,
Mm.
and you're,
Yeah.
more than welcome to feel that way.
And I'll keep
Or,
you posted if anything comes up. But
That did sound weird. You are welcome to feel scared.
I mean, no, well,
Feel.
here's the thing. It's like, Jacob, not to any degree, and myself to a much lesser degree, we don't really have anything you know, to fear. Would you agree, Jacob?
Not usually.
I mean, in this regard, whatever, you can be afraid of, spiders or something like. But in this case, I don't know, Jacob, do you feel like things are being taken away from you?
No.
Let us know. You know, in Gamergate and in gaming and in comics, do you feel represented? Let
Uh,
us know in the comments on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever you're watching this, however you're watching this or listening to this. Let us know. Do you feel represented? Is your representation enough? Does there need to be more? Does there need to be less? Let us know. And why? Honestly, definitely why. That
And
has been.
if you're someone in a population that's been considered underrepresented and you feel like you have enough representation, if you could give some of the examples of what you consider the best representation, that would be
Yeah.
fantastic. Just from my perspective, I would love to know what your best examples are, just so that I can go check them out.
Yeah.
I
So
want
let
to
us
know
know
what
what you
cool games
think.
to play, but that I haven't
Let
yet.
us know. Let us know why you think these things. And that has been this horribly depressing episode of the Dr. Z Show. But it is something we need to talk about, and we need to acknowledge that these things exist in our community.
Yep.
But I don't know about you two. I am going to take an emotional bath after this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Irina, for being with us again and
Thank
sharing
you.
your much needed opinion.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you.
That
And
has been.
we will see everyone later.
Yeah, we will see you next time on the Dr. Z Show.
Adios.
What did I say?